Welcome to the LowCarbUSA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
So, Babs, welcome to the show. You came to me pretty recently with telling me that you'd were about to try to publish a book about the health benefits of cheese.
That's right.
Since that's a big thing for a lot of us in this community, and some things that some people are actually concerned about, we thought we'd talk about it. So maybe tell us about you and how you even got to this point, and then we can talk more about the book.
Okay. Well, it started with my opposition to cheese and saturated fat and the whole, that routine. And when I found out that the American Heart Association and other institutions were actually giving us the wrong message, as a health professional, it really bothered me. And I had been working with, personal training clients for 25 years. I taught college classes. I spoke at conferences. I did, seminars. I mean, I was just all in. And when I found out that it wasn't true, it really bothered me. Although I was at the point in my career where I could have retired and just gone sailing. But, I thought about how damaging this low fat, high carb diet was for a while. I said, I need to do something different, maybe make a contribution to the problem. So I wrote a book about how to prevent childhood obesity. And so that was happening. And then I went, well, what else can I do? And so I started studying the cheese nutrition because my husband started making cheese at home. And I said, I cannot eat that. He says, why? I said, because it'll kill me and make me fat, or vice versa, or both. And being a health professional for, 25 years, he says, you really need to get into the research, get down and dive deep, because you are going to be wrong about this. I said, no, you don't understand. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm a health professional in the family, and I'm right. So that's how that started. And then I read some books. Let me show you. Same books that you've read. So I started with, on my way to American Cheese Society conference, I read this, and I realized that I was wrong. When he talks about LDL was somewhat caused by carbohydrates, that changed my life. Then I read Johnny Bowden's book on cholesterol and heart disease. Then I read this one. Of course, everybody knows this one.
Good calories, bad calories, yeah.
Yeah, that was a turning point for sure. And then, of course, my favorite, and yours and my mutual friend, Nina Teicholz. And that one really turned me around. So I had a lot of good resources, reliable resources to kind of base my transition from a health professional to, a cheese writer. Can you imagine? American Council on Exercise and the American College of Sports Medicine finds out that I'm a certified exercise physiologist and I'm writing about cheese. It's really different, isn't it?
Yeah, no, totally.
So that was the part of the short version of my transition. So part of it was fueled by anger. I'll be honest with you. When I started reading this stuff about all of the studies that show that saturated fat really didn't cause heart disease, I was furious, actually. I remember reading a book. It was Gary Taub's book. I was reading it. My cats were asleep in the office. I literally threw the book into the wall, crashed, knocked over a lamp. The glass is shattered. The cats are screaming, thinking it's a tornado or something. But, I was so upset. I said, got to do something about this. And so that's why I thought, well, I'll go into the cheese world and see what happens. And it's interesting because I like to use cheese as a door opening. So instead of talking to someone about, you really need to lose weight, you need to exercise and quit eating donuts, I said, let me use the vehicle called cheese. Who doesn't love cheese? Kids love cheese. Everybody loves cheese. Of course, not everybody can eat it, but so that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm using cheese as the vehicle.
Okay. So, let's talk about cheese then, because like you said, you didn't think so, and a lot of people also don't think so, that it's healthy and that. So maybe let's get into that science. Let's talk about cheese and why it is it is healthy, and is it all cheese? Is it only certain cheeses? I'm sure that there's a lot here that we can talk about.
Boy, there are 2,000 cheeses, and I know that I can memorize them alphabetically, and we could go through that. It'll take about a week to talk through all of them. But so there are so many different cheeses. So I've learned from the cheese people that there are actually over 2,000 different cheeses. And I just find that fascinating because there's only one recipe for Cheetos, but there's 2,000 or more recipes for cheese. So when people ask me, is cheese healthy? I say yes, and then I say no. And the yes part is there are so many cheeses that are very healthy, and we could go into why in a minute. And then there are some cheeses that are not healthy. So it depends on so many factors. So think about starting from the soil to the grass. So the soil is enriching, it has enriching microbes and nutrients, and then the grass grows in there, and then the cow or the animal eats the grass, and then the milk as a result is very good or not so much, depending on what the cow eats, and then that turns into cheese. So because there's so many variables, altitude, climate, temperature, people, like cheesemakers in Petaluma, California, their cheese is going to be vastly different than what we have here in Central Texas, even though it may be the same brand or same recipe. So many elements involved. So that's the reason why I can't say generally, I cannot say the words cheese is healthy, because there's so much to it, which makes this so complicated because there's so much biochemistry and environmental elements to it that influence the milk. It's just fascinating.
Yeah. So, but let's tell us something about the actual. Okay. So let's go back. Some cheese is healthy. So tell us about that. Which ones are and why?
Okay. So one of the things that I'm just fascinated with is a process called Transhumans, and it's in Switzerland. The farmers they gather their cows or their herd, and they walk up these mountains in the Alps, and along the way the cows or the animals, depends on the animals, are eating food by nature. Lots of grasses, lots of herbs, lots of flowers, and at different altitudes the crops change, so they get all these different kinds of nutrients from the food. All of this is just from the mountain, whatever's growing on the mountain. So they bring these cows up to a certain level, and they have, but Switzerland has these separated into like 24, what would they call, I don't know what they call them, but each farmer gets a certain segment of the mountain, and they go up, and they spend up about 100 days up there, and they bring their milk down on these cable cars that are not fit for humans. So they just put them in buckets, and they actually, the cable car lowers the milk into what they call a cheesemaking facility. So there's this little house, the cheesemaker's waiting, and they have the milk, and they make cheese there. And then toward the end of I think it's the end of August or maybe early September, they bring all the cows back down to the flat level, and then they get ready for winter. But that diversity of nutrients in the soil makes a huge difference. And I'll give you an example why. There's, about conjugated linoleic acid. Well, it comes from the beta carotene in the grass. So there is enormous CLAs in Alpine style cheese, and that is known to, well, it's probably 8 or 10 different illnesses that actually helps, one of it which is cancer. So when you have that sort of situation where your animals are getting a lot of diversity of food from nature, it makes a huge difference. Let me give you another example. When I first started learning about cheese, I went on the Texas cheese tour, which is something I created. So I went all over the state of Texas and interviewed cheesemakers, cheese retailers, cheese writers, cheese farmers, the dairy people, the farmers that actually raised the animals, and a few goats. At the time we didn't have sheep, but we do now. So I went into this Texas cheese tour and explored the whole world of cheese, and I was so I lacked so much information. I didn't even know what questions to ask. My husband had to write the questions for a while. So I get down and meet the cheese people, and the first thing I wanted to know was, how are the animals being treated? That's not related to nutrition, but that was a personal concern of mine. So I thought, well, I'm going to find something really bad, and I'm going to tell my husband that they are cruel to their animals. Guess what? He was right. These people pamper their animals. So there was a man, Stuart Veldhuizen in Central Texas. He has a dairy. It's a cheese. It's a cow milk and sheep. And in Central Texas in early June, it's hot. It was already 100 degrees that day. And I noticed the cows were not drinking out of what we call ponds or tanks. And I said, Stuart, why aren't the animals drinking? It's hot today. And he goes, oh my goodness, Babs, they don't drink out of the tank. See those stainless steel vats over there? We give them fresh water every day. I went, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. And then I looked around, and there's this tall green grass and these flowers sprouting, all these different things. I'm from Texas. I'm from Central Texas, and I've never seen a pasture look so lush. I said, what's the deal with your grass? Do you water every day? Do you fertilize? How do you get this grass so pretty? And he says, well, we plant a lot of different flowers. We have a tractor, and we just plant the seeds. We have different grasses, different herbs, and all of that, you can taste it in the milk, which is very rich and very wonderful. And I thought, okay, I'm going to like this. This is going to be fun. And those are just two examples.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. So are we saying that if the cows weren't brought up in the mountains of Switzerland, that the cheese is not healthy? I mean, if I'm going to, I think what would be useful here is, if I'm going to go down to my grocery store and buy some cheese, is that cheese bad for me? Is there some of it that is and some of it that's not? What should I be looking at?
So there's a lot of difference between the conventional and large industrial cheese than, like your local farmer down the street or down in a different county or something. I have found that the farmstead cheesemakers raise their own animals. They milk their cows twice a day. And they're very careful about what they feed the animal. They feed the animal optimal food and let them, graze on pasture when they can. But even in the winter, they feed them good food. Whereas the conventional, highly industrial cheesemakers often have cows or animals confined inside a barn, and they never get to go out. They just spend their whole life there, and they are not fed very optimal food. And that's going to make a difference in the milk and therefore the cheese. So if you ask me about a high industrial cheesemaker, is the cheese healthy? There are three things to say. One is, what did they feed the cows? Two, how do they treat the cows? In other words, were they stressed? Were they real cold in the winter? Were they really hot in the summer? And also, it depends too on the breed of the cow. The breed of the cow makes a difference in how much milk they produce, and what kind of nutrient profile they have. Is it higher fat, higher protein, more water, whatever. Then we need to talk about the microbes in cheese. So there's a lot of microbes, very, very very well known microbes. Don't ask me to name them. There's only 4,000 or something. But the microbes in cheese makes it a live food. The cheese is alive. So if you have a cheese on your plate, let's say a blue cheese, and you're ready to eat it or enjoy it on crackers or whatever. But there are microbes in there that are continue to do work. So every day the cheese changes. So the microbes in cheese is a really big part of what makes it healthy. So that depends on a lot of factors, going back to, the field, the soil, and that sort of thing. But also the cheesemaker can add microbes, add bacteria to influence its, texture, flavor, and its health benefits.
Okay, but still, I'm going down to the store. So now what should I be looking for? How do I know what is good or bad? I mean, we're saying that some are good and some are bad, and
Yeah.
why, but how do I
Okay.
know that if I go to the store?
Well, you would not know. You would have to do a little research before you go. I always recommend buying local. So if there's a farmstead cheesemaker or an artisan cheesemaker in your neighborhood or in your area, buy from them, because you can actually ask them about their practices. You can ask them all these different questions. You can look on their website and look at the pictures, look at the grass. You can ask questions like, how much sunlight and herbs, pasture, feeding do they get to have? So there's a benefit from really talking to the people who make the cheese. Now, if you don't want to go to that sort of trouble, I would recommend, well, it depends on if you're lactose intolerant. If you're lactose intolerant, then you need to buy aged hard cheese, especially sheep and goat, okay, goat milk and sheep. It's easier to digest. But generally speaking, if you can see on the label that it says organic, then that's probably a really good sign that it's going to be better than the highly industrial cheese. If it's not organic, then I would go with sheep, because sheep, just generally speaking, their milk is a lot higher in fat and higher in protein than cow's milk, but it's condensed very, very tightly. So it doesn't take a lot of volume to reach satisfaction. If you compare it to like a fresh cow milk cheese, it's going to have a lot more water, versus the sheep hard cheese. It's going to have a lot more nutrients. So you're going to get that satiety factor, which is a big deal. Then you have to think about like calcium. Calcium is a big deal in cheese, and as you know, it's great for human health. So I basically, I would recommend going into the like the artisan, the cheesemaker's website and read. Usually they have some nutritional information. I'm going to say that all industrial cheeses are good for one reason, and that is the fact that I'm trying to get people to eat fewer carbs and more fatty type food. And I am not convinced that this is correct, because I haven't looked at the industrial cheeses that well, but I'm going to say that a chunk of cheap cheddar from a highly industrial cheesemaker is better than a bag of chips or cookies. So that's basically my message. A lot of the foods, like in Texas, we have, well, you probably have the Whole Foods too, right?
We do, yes, yeah.
So Whole Foods has a lot of great cheeses that are very healthy, and just look for the organic, look for your dairy, your local farmer, and talk to them. You can go to like farmers markets are a great place to buy cheese. And but think about cheese is like the universal food for humanity, like music is the universal language for the whole world. The marketability of cheese is global. Think about a little kid in the back seat of the car, and you're deciding what are you going to feed this child, because you've got a 40-minute drive to wherever you're going, and little Johnny's really hungry, screaming. What are you going to give him? You're going to stop and go through the drive-through and give him, a whatever, I don't want to name anything, but, or are you just going to get your little bag of cut up cheeses that little Johnny likes in little cubes, and he doesn't need a napkin or a fork or anything. You hand little Johnny the cheese cubes and he's going to be happy. And part of that is the human body needs good fats, and it also, triggers leptin, that hormone that makes you feel full, which is an advantage, because if you feed little Johnny chips or cookies, 10 minutes later they're going to be screaming for more, right? If you give the child some cheese, maybe 1 or 2 ounces, I'm serious, 1 or 2 ounces, that is going to make him very satisfied, and he's going to take a nap. That should be in my book.
You touched on something there that that is important to me. we were talking about all these boutique cheeses and everything, and that's what we should be looking for. But if you go and get some generic industrialized block of mature cheddar or whatever, that's going to be way better than eating all the garbage and stuff. And it's something that, like, I talk about when we talk about meat. Grass fed, and everybody's going on about this. It's a big thing.
Yeah.
But the commercially produced meat is a lot cheaper, and there are a lot of people that cannot afford the grass fed versions and all these fancy things. And I always get kind of uptight about it. Like I say to people, don't ever let me hear you tell people that they can't do keto because they can't afford grass-fed beef.
Right. I agree with that.
If you can afford it and you're able to support these farmers, and eventually as the demand for that becomes greater and greater, the prices will be able to come down, and maybe eventually it will be on an equal footing price-wise with the commercially produced stuff. And that would be brilliant. But in the meantime, eat what you can afford. And if you can afford more, then learn about what you can look for in these things. And it sounds like it's the same thing with cheese, right?
Yes. I know that some of the cheeses...
Don't not eat cheese because you can't afford...
Well, exactly. Right. Good. That's a good point.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I say that in my presentations because not everybody can afford expensive cheese. And I'm not saying you have to get the health benefit. Let me just say that this diabetes problem that we have with all the sugar and the carbs, if you can find a food that does not stimulate the insulin need for that glucose in your blood, go for it, and it could be peanut butter that's not got sugar in it. It could be the cheap peanut butter, or it could be cheap cheese. And I'm with you on that because a lot of people say, this is $28 a pound. I can't afford it. I said, I understand that. That's why when I do my presentations, sometimes I'll bring a chunk of cheese that's an industrial, what we're talking about, a big brick size, and this costs $7, and this little chunk of cheese over here costs $12. And I understand that. So if you cannot afford the good cheese, then by all means eat the cheaper cheese, because it still has calcium, still has the nutrients. Phosphorus has, vitamin D, and it has some good fats, believe it or not. They may not be the optimal, but there are a lot of good fats. And the main thing is it doesn't increase your need for insulin. So that in itself is a big plus, I think. And I want to tell you a little bit, something I learned about through the artisan cheese world. They don't make cheese exactly the same every day. So they might make a brie type cheese that might be their biggest seller. But every time they make it, because of the different seasons, it's going to be different. It's going to taste a little bit different. Some people like the consistency of that orange color, that same texture, that same taste. They know exactly how well it melts, what it tastes like. And so the normal consumer will often buy cheese that's not the artisan style because it's consistent. If you get a block of cheese and you want to make a sauce, and you know exactly what it looks like and tastes, and you'll know that it's not going to mess up your recipe. So that's maybe a benefit to some degree in terms of the consumer, because they want it to be very consistent. And then those who are a little bit adventuresome want to explore the different seasons and different tastes and textures of the same cheese. So the cheese you get in the spring from the same farmer is going to taste different than the cheese that you get in winter from the same farmer. And it's really a fascinating situation.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about lactose and hard and soft cheeses. Maybe could you explain a little bit, like, the difference between a soft cheese and a hard cheese in terms of what it contains, so that people are aware, like, okay, because I love brie and cheese, soft cheese or whatever, but you must understand that it has more lactose, whatever. So
right. So that's why the hard aged cheeses have either 0 sugar or maybe just a trace. The harder and the more aged it's age, for example, a 3-year-old versus a 1-year-old cheddar, it's just going to have a different lactose content because the aging process just gets rid of the sugar. So the people that talk to me, I like to go into cheese shops and talk to the customers and just say, what, you think this is healthy? They don't know me from the man in the moon. And they go, I have to buy, I only can eat this amount of, this cheese because it really bothers my stomach and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, if you try aged sheep or aged goat cheese, you're going to find that your body can tolerate that better. And that's awesome. And versus like the softer cheeses, people that are lactose intolerant have to take these pills that have these enzymes that help break down the sugar. My husband's one of those. He makes cheese. He loves cheese, but he's lactose intolerant. So he has this beautiful cheese board, and then this little bottle of dairy pills that he takes, and he knows exactly how many pills that he needs to digest different cheeses, mainly because we eat a lot of cheese.
Okay, so just for some, for a few of the people who are listening to this that don't know, that when you talk about sugar in the cheese, it's not added table sugar. The lactose itself is the naturally occurring form of sugar in milk, right? And so
that's correct. Yes.
Okay. So now, just quickly, maybe the last thing is you were talking about goat. I was aware of goat cheese. I've eaten a lot of goat cheese, in fact, but I didn't actually know. Maybe this is embarrassing to admit, but I didn't even know that they sold commercially, at least, sheep cheese. I don't even remember seeing it. Is it only in certain places, in certain states? Is it something that is actually in my store and I just haven't seen it?
Oh, it's there. I know it's there. Well, if you go to Whole Foods, I promise you it's there. But even in your local store, I don't know if you have Kroger there, but we have Kroger stores here that have a little cheese counter. And it's actually awesome because it's not huge, but they have a good variety. And so usually the cheesemonger, the person behind the counter, can help guide you to, whatever. But yeah, sheep cheese is awesome. And I personally prefer it. Just because of the nutrients, and I'm kind of hardcore. I mean, yeah, I'm a purist when it comes to cheese, and I'm also very nutrient minded. It's just comes from my background in exercise physiology. So I would encourage you and your readers and your listeners to try sheep cheese, especially if you have a little GI problem, and also look in your state to see maybe there's a sheep farmer around your neighborhood. I doubt San Diego has a lot because it's hot. Typically, sheep farmers, dairy farmers are a little bit colder. You'll find a lot of them in Wisconsin and Maine and that sort of thing. We actually have one in Texas. So this is interesting. I'm going next week to visit this farm, Veldhuizen Farm, and they're the only sheep cheesemaker in the state of Texas. And I always worry about the heat because it's really hot in Texas in the summer. But what they've done is they did some research and they found 2 different breeds of sheep that can handle heat, and they come from the desert of Iran and the Middle Eastern countries. So they're then proven to be able to handle the heat and yet produce good milk. So I'll keep you posted on that. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking if we do get sheep cheese, yeah, it's definitely be imported from some other area of the country. Definitely not especially commercially homegrown. But I go on about cheaper meat and that, Pam and I are always shopping for the manager specials and stuff like that. So I'm generally down the generic cheese aisle and not the boutique cheeses, which the place we go to does have a little place there where you can go and look at fancier cheeses and that. But I normally am not going past there. I'm going to stop past and see if I can find some sheep cheese there the next time I'm there, and at least get a little piece and try it. Yeah,
try different things. And if you have a cheese shop near, it is really fun because the cheesemonger behind the counter will guide you through. They start with kind of milder cheese at one end, and then by the time you get to the other end of the counter, it's the more, stronger, more like the blue cheese and stuff like that. And it's really fun because they are certified cheesemongers, and they know a lot about cheese, and they know how to match your flavor profile. For example, they'll say, well, what cheeses do you like? And you say, mozzarella and cheddar, mozzarella and cheddar. Okay, well, let's try this. This is a style of mozzarella. It's from Vermont. This one is from Texas. This one's from whatever. And they'll guide you through, and you get to taste the cheeses, which along the way is awesome because by the time you get to the end, you've tasted the 4 cheeses that you want to buy. But if you go to a big grocery store, a lot of times they don't have that option. And so
you're not going to
spend $5 on something you don't like, and even your dog doesn't like. So
no, I don't even know if there is a cheese shop in San Diego. There must be one somewhere.
I'm sure there is.
I need to look it up and go and visit one and see.
Yes. So when my book gets published, I will do a presentation there. I will go all over the place, including other than the United States. I'm getting my passport updated, and I have friends all over the world. I'm going to speak in Italy. I'm going to speak in France, although they don't need any help from me. I've learned so much from the French. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And their heart disease prevalence is so much lower than ours, but they eat a lot of cheese. They eat much more cheese than Americans, and it has more fat.
Yeah. So you mentioned your book.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good way to finish off here. It's not published yet. Do you have a date? Do you know when it's likely to come out?
No.
Okay. So if we don't know, so there's no pre-order or something like that people can go and do. So in the meantime, what can people do? Where can they find out about you, hear about the progress of when this book's going to come out? Tell us about where people can find more info.
I post a lot of information on my Facebook, which is Healthy Cheese Lady. And that's real relevant. It's all new. I'm always digging around the new research for something new. HealthyCheeseLady.com is my website. But I can tell you that if you go to Facebook, my Facebook page, you'll learn a lot. That's where I put a lot of energy in. And another thing is I am starting a keto cheese diet in probably February. So this is going to be a 12-week program that I'm going to offer for people. It'll be Zoom, just like this, Zoom room. And I'm going to talk about the different nutrients in cheese and why it's healthy. So if you have a mental health issue, or if you're diabetic, or osteoporosis, whatever, we'll make these different talk about these different topics. And it's not a diet because I'm not a nutritionist, but it's guidance. And we will follow the keto kind of approach. And it's not like they have to. They can just do whatever they want to. But I know if they listen to me 12 hours, they're going to learn a lot, and they're going to make some good choices in their diet.
Okay. Well, cool. Let's encourage people to go and take a look and learn more about cheese.
Yes, Doug. Thank you so much. And I'm so impressed with what you and Pam are doing. I've been following, and you guys are just doing great work. And at some point, I'm going to come to one of your conferences and
I look forward to it.
Yeah, share the world. Share the good news with the world. So as we say in the cheese world, we want to spread the curd.
Oh, okay, cool.
Whatever.
Very nice.
Thank you again, Doug. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Awesome. You too. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
You've been listening to an episode of the LowCarbUSA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/LowCarbUSA.